Hey everybody, welcome to another Warships replay. This one is once again in the Atago on North. This is a bit of a recurring theme. Obviously I'm really enjoying this ship. It's also really good for grinding credits. There will be some variety coming soon though, so don't fret. Now this match is not too bad. Each team has 4 battleships, 2 carriers, and although we have an extra destroyer, the enemy have an extra cruiser, so it more or less balances out. If we look at the actual team comp, the tiers aren't too bad either. They're in fact almost perfectly matched. So that's not at all bad. We're facing an Amagi on the enemy team as well as a North Carolina. Meanwhile, we have much the same setup in our own team. I start out by heading west to the open water there. And already we've spotted one of the enemy cruisers. It is an Atago, not surprising, that makes up the majority of their team. Now I do still have HE loaded. Usually I'll keep my first round as HE in case the first thing I run into is a destroyer. But as soon as that salvo's out, I switch to AP to deal with this guy by trying to get some nice Citadel hits. And in fact, if that had been an AP salvo, that probably would have knocked half of his hit points off, but instead, does about 6,000 damage and sets him on fire, which is still respectable, but it's not the kind of pain that I would like to be putting on him. That's much more like it. That's what should have happened there. I'm taking some scattered fire there from the Warspite. And by now I switch back to HE to get some passing shots into the Congo, but instead I go for the shots on the Farragut. If I can take out a destroyer this early in the match, it will be a huge bonus to my team, and holy fuck, that's a lot of planes. I do actually hit the Farragut, and I knock off half his hit points almost, and set him on fire. I wasn't actually expecting that, so I'm pretty happy with that result. I managed to just get one more salvo out over that mountain before I'm masked by it, and it looks like this guy's about to get dunked on. He eats a torp there, and with HE still loaded from dealing with a destroyer, I quickly fire off half of my guns at him, the other half reload to AP. Our Sims beats a hasty retreat, a good idea. He really doesn't want to be taking on an Atago, even a crippled one, in a close-up fight. That guy should be finished there. Sure enough, down he goes.
Enemy cruiser sunk.
And now I'm launching some torps at these guys. Now, these aren't so much aimed at any particular ship there, although you can see I was going for the lead marker on the Congo. They're just kind of put into the water to see what they catch. A lot of the enemy ships are grouped up in a big clusterfuck there, and so there's a good chance that even if I don't hit what I'm aiming at, I will hit something. At this point it looks like the enemy carrier is starting to get eyes for me, or one of them anyway. So I trigger my anti-aircraft ability, perhaps a bit too early. It looks like they might actually be going for our battleships, and begin to double back around. Once again, not firing these at the Warspite, obviously, since I would have to lead them much more. I'm just firing them in that direction to see what they catch. I've taken some pretty considerable damage at this point, so I want to pull back a bit and try and preserve those hit points as long as I can. Our Sims, meanwhile, has put up a smoke screen. Reminder, smoke screens do work both ways, something to consider whenever you're playing a destroyer. You will blind your own team by popping smoke, so you've got to really save it when it's needed. In this case, it's not too much of an issue. The enemy battleships are mostly remaining lit. And in any case, I'm heading away from this section of the map. There's just too much shit here. Warspite is
Fighter ready for takeoff.
really playing it risky here, being that close. If it wasn't for the Sims being in my way, I would have fired torps here. You can see me setting up for it, but I just don't want to risk hitting a friendly. He fires off his torps anyway, but he might be out of range. He's certainly on the edge of it. So if that Warspite pulls away from him at all, those are probably going to miss. Takes some pretty serious damage there, unfortunately. But it looks like this Warspite's about done. Sure enough, the Sims was actually able to kill him.
Problem solved, sir.
The enemy Farragut is reversing for some ungodly reason. Fire off some shells at him, but the mountain catches them. Doesn't matter anyway because he gets cleaned up by a teammate. Another Atago, and rather than switch to AP, I just hold on to the HE for now. I will switch after my next shot. Now there is actually a crew skill which reduces the loading time when you switch shell types, and it looks really useful, but I haven't got it yet. I've been putting my points into other skills that are more useful. And in fact I actually forgot to switch ammo types here, so I'm still shooting HE like an idiot. I think I was kind of so caught up in the moment that I just didn't notice. There was a lot going on. In any case, he's now giving me a bad angle, so HE is the appropriate ammo for this situation. But the island eats it. I switch back to AP now, having finally noticed I was shooting the wrong kind of ammo, and he's starting to turn to unmask his guns, which is giving me a much better angle on him. I cut my speed here, just to make sure I'm not masked by the island. I also want to begin to turn and head down this channel. Now I'm playing it a bit risky, slowing down this much, particularly so close to an enemy ship that has torpedoes. But I'm hoping he's occupied enough by the Atlanta that he won't be able to finish me off while I do this. Of course, he is giving me a bad angle again, so I did go back to HE. Down he goes.
We've destroyed an enemy cruiser.
Congo's in range, and is the only real obvious target here. The rest are all masked by islands. But I've got to wait until I can get some free space on my left side, and then unmask my stern guns. Instead of spamming HE at the Congo, I actually decide to switch targets, and I go for this Atago over here, who is probably about to kill our Atlanta if he keeps that up. I'm not sure of the angle. I probably would be able to Citadel hit him if my shots actually hit, but either way I hold on to the HE for a bit. Fire off some torpedoes at the Cleveland before realizing it's a waste. He's dead anyway. I let some more go. I don't think I actually realized that the Cleveland had died at that point in the match. I was just not paying as much attention as I should have been. Dive in behind this island to try and get some cover and hopefully conceal myself from the enemy. I don't want to be spotted at this point if I can help it. There's a lot of enemy ships around me. And this Congo is looking directly at me. Now, he is going to really hurt me if he hits. And sure enough he does. And that was with HE. If he'd been firing AP, I suspect that would have still been a Citadel and it would have killed me, because his aim looked pretty good there. So although I have been finally put to the bottom of the sea, I was able to do a pretty decent amount of damage this match. I was able to wipe out one of the enemy cruisers real early, and then get some considerable hits on their other stuff as well, and especially that destroyer too. Knocking hit points off destroyers is always doing your teammates a huge favour. particularly because when you're in a battleship, if a destroyer comes up on you and you don't have time to switch to HE, you're just going to have to go with AP, and unless you get a really good shot down its front or its rear, and it obviously goes all the way through the ship and blows up inside, you're probably only going to do about 1,000, 2,000 damage at most from an AP hit, even a really solid one with multiple shells hitting. And so the more HP you can shave off a destroyer before it closes range, the happier your teammates are going to be when inevitably they have to just kind of basically snapshot it with whatever they've got loaded. It also forces the destroyers to play a little more conservatively and maybe think twice before they decide to charge in and rush something. Now here we're watching a Sims at work. The Sims is the Tier 7 US Premium Destroyer. Like most of the higher tier US destroyers, it has the fantastic 5-inch 38 caliber gun. It's a dual-purpose gun, arguably the best dual-purpose gun of World War II. The Americans put it on fucking everything. All their destroyers, most of their cruisers and battleships as secondary armament, it was just everywhere. It was a fantastic gun. And in World of Warships, it is a fantastic gun in this too. Given decent angles, it can score Citadel hits on most cruisers. It puts out a lot of fire very quickly. And generally the mountings it's in, these turrets, traverse very, very quickly, particularly compared to the Japanese destroyers. And so that makes the Americans fantastic brawlers. They can just dive into a fight and not really worry about which direction their guns are pointing, whereas when you're playing Japanese destroyers you have to pre-aim everything about 30 seconds beforehand, otherwise your turrets will be pointing the wrong way. And to a lesser extent the Gurimiyashi has the same problem, it's got very, very slow traversing turrets. Now, of course, there has to be some kind of trade-off for this, and the Sims is very fast, so it's not that. The trade-off that the Sims has to make for having such fantastic gunnery is having shit-awful torpedoes. They only have about a 5.5 kilometer range from memory, so very, very, very short range. Particularly at Tier 7, that's basically suicide. When you consider that the Tier 7 Japanese battleship, the Nagato, has probably some of the best secondary armament for tier in the game, it just chews up everything that comes near it, and then you think about, well, if somebody's got all the captain skills unlocked to improve secondary range, and they've got the equipment mounted that improves secondary range, they're going to be able to reach much further than your torpedoes can with those secondary guns, which is to say nothing of if they're pointing their main turrets at you. And so, playing the American destroyers, you have to really get a sense of where you can and can't afford to engage people with your torpedoes. A lot of the time, it's better to just engage them from a distance with the guns and try and rain down HE on them, using your agility and your rapidly traversing turrets to sort of behave as standoff. Obviously, because of those turrets, you're able to fire while juking shots a lot more proficiently than any other destroyer in the game, which is a huge advantage. A Japanese destroyer or the Gurimiyashi have to basically move in a straight line or make very, very gentle turns if they want to fire their guns at something. They can either evade or they can shoot, they can't do both. Of course, torpedo range doesn't really matter when you set up an ambush, which is the other thing that the American destroyers are fantastic at. So, a lot of the time, when I've come up against good Sims players, what they do is they'll position themselves behind an island and let their teammates spot things coming around the island, and at the perfect moment, they'll spring out from behind it and shit out torpedoes in every direction, and usually knock off a lot of hit points or kill somebody. And of course, by then they've got the element of surprise. The person who was on the receiving end is probably shitting their pants, mashing their damage control team. And so that gives the destroyer a chance to pop smoke and fuck off before it can get shot at. So they do have a very unique playstyle, much, much different to the Japanese. The Japanese are kind of more ambush-based for a different reason. They have a lot of range on their torpedoes, but their guns are really just useless. So the Japanese rely on either torp sniping people, or really just being sneaky. The Americans don't need to be sneaky so much, they just need to be good at dodging. We got this one pretty much in the bag. It was looking maybe a little bit dicey there for a minute, but my team have pulled it out. And over here we can see the North Carolina in all its glory. This ship is absolutely fantastic, and I cannot sing its praises highly enough. My highest ever damage game was in the North Carolina, 280,000 damage in one match. I also managed to sink an Iowa in 3 broadsides in that match without taking any significant damage. It is just a fantastic